Some councillors are still retrieving their afternoon refreshments. Must have taken the long way. You could crawl back on all fours quicker than that. All right. So improvement on our transport coordination skills, but there we go. Well, welcome everybody back to the resumption of the submissions on Head Start. We have a session now that runs till about 4:10. Then we'll have a break, and then we have two submitters in succession commencing at 5:30 p.m. So the first submitter in this session is Vic Labour, and we have Arina Noble and Charlie Cowdery. So we're taking submissions from the lectern, guys. Yep, thank you. Lovely. And we're in your hands.
Cool. Is this on? Okay, lovely. Kia ora, Council, my name's Aaron and this is Charlie. We're here from Vic Labour. I'm the chair. Charlie's the Māori Vice Chair. We're here from Vic Labour, which is the youth branch of the Labour Party here in Wellington. I'm sure you know who we are already. I feel like we've done a couple of these. So
we're familiar with the Labour Party.
Our submission today will go through kind of the 4 questions that you all asked us to consider, and then at the end we'll have a couple principal ideas that we want you to be thinking about when you're making these decisions and having these discussions.
Cool. So just on the first kind of point of discussion, so whether the Head Start pathway or the backstop pathway, we believe it's important that Council develop a Head Start amalgamation proposal. It is unclear whether the uniformly applied backstop pathway, which details aren't entirely ironed out, properly reflects Wellington's needs. So the Head Start pathway, meanwhile, allows the Council to develop proposals that reflect local circumstances, which may improve community buy-in and legitimacy. So yeah, there's no real benefit we see with going with the backstop pathway. In terms of what kind of local authority groupings we would be seeing, so we kind of broadly support the amalgamating the urban Wellington councils into one body. So that includes Wellington City, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, Porirua, and the Kapiti Coast as one unitary authority. And then having a separate one for the Wairarapa, including Masterton, Carterton, and South Wairarapa, kind of just as they are sort of generally seen as a distinct sub-region, and it should retain its own local authority. But they should also, they should still participate in regional governance, and we would expect to see that continue where it is appropriate.
Yeah, so kind of on the kind of structural reorganisation thing, we're generally supportive of one large unitary council. So I know that the model kind of being proposed is that of the community councils and then one large unitary council. We are quite sceptical of the concept of community councils generally, and we would much prefer just one big, large unitary council across the entire region, without kind of these sub-region ones for Wellington City, Porirua, Lower Hutt, etc., etc. If it becomes a thing that community councils are established, we believe there should be separation between that and the big unitary one. There shouldn't be much cross-contamination, people holding kind of multiple roles, and they should have clear powers delegated to them. It should be, shouldn't be any doubt on whose power is where. Our reason generally for supporting a larger unitary one is that we think it supports greater representation overall, can allow for more effective decision-making for things like regional transport, housing, services, etc., etc. It's also generally an easier political structure for people to understand. Having a bunch of different kind of sub-structures which everyone has to participate or vote on won't be democratically beneficial in our view. When it comes to amalgamation, we see there are risks and opportunities here. The opportunities obviously being better regional decision-making, better long-term planning for the region, longer-term better financial situations. The risks are around the structure we see, because you have the opportunity to have something really good or something absolutely detrimental to just kind of the long-term health of the region. And Charlie's going to talk about the principles.
Yeah, so just to close it out with some principles that I think should be key of mind and should be thought about when designing this kind of amalgamation proposal. Decisions around the structure of amalgamated councils throughout the whole process should be made with the goal to increase democratic participation in local government. Councils should uphold and sustain iwi relations, and I know there's kind of been an added layer of difficulty with the removal of a mana whakahono arohi agreements, but at the end of the day, it's important that iwi have a voice and can collaborate on local matters. And mātauranga Māori, especially like rohi-specific knowledge, always has a place with council, and it builds towards enduring iwi council relationships. So that should be kind of upheld to the best of the ability, and it's also important to uphold it with our te tiriti or waitangi obligations or giving effect to te tiriti. Council services must continue to be delivered to the same level or greater to all communities within the region. Shouldn't really be seeing community services be deteriorated or threatened in any way. And local communities should be given a genuine opportunity to have their say on all parts of the amalgamation proposal. So that's including the design, the implementation, and the rollout of the amalgamation proposal. So we support and encourage that the council advocate for kind of a public referendum as well on whatever the final outcomes are agreed to by the council's central government, so everyone should have a say.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I'll ask for before I call for questions, just on the point you make about the favouring a larger unitary council as opposed to having a sub-regional level as your preferred model. What do you consider to be a sort of, given the size of the region and population it would cover, the ideal size of council you would see for a large unitary council?
Yes, I understand in the Local Government Act, I think the max is you can have 30 councillors. A specific number I could not probably give you, but our general view would be larger is better.
Yeah. All right, thank you. I think we had a question from Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks. You mentioned how you'd like to actually see the groupings. Now, you mentioned Kapiti in with Wellington, correct? But Kapiti have already announced that they're not so enthusiastic about joining our group. So what's your view on whether we should actually, still sort of include them in if they're reluctant?
Yeah. As we see it, kind of the point of one of the big points of amalgamation is to ensure that everyone affected by decisions in the region has a say on it, right? And when we look at who is affected, particularly in the city, who uses our services, who uses our roads, infrastructure, etc., that is the wider Wellington labour market, right? And that extends up to the Kapiti region. So we should be, our logic for including them is that they are a part of that labour market. People commute from Kapiti to Wellington City and back. They should have a voice in that. Obviously, they don't want to, or they may be hesitant to. They could very well be included by the government anyway, and so the option should still be there.
Great, thank you.
I have a question from Councillor Osborne.
Thanks. Two questions, one really quickly. FPP or STV?
STV.
Good. And the second question is, your preference is for just the one layer of governance, but you acknowledge that if there were two, there'd need to be really clear delineation of the powers of the two bodies. I'm wondering if you had any suggestions, proposals about what powers that lower level, that community council model,
Yeah,
they should hold?
I think kind of the goal of community councils is around kind of the direct engagement between the citizens and the local councils, right? So that would be, not off the top of my head, I don't have anything, but that's kind of the thing is that it's more of an engagement kind of based thing rather than a large level decision making. When it comes to powers, I know the idea has been around kind of roading services, things like cycleways and all that. That could be something that you guys decide. Sorry, I don't have a concrete answer on that for you.
All right, unless there's anything else. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Charlie. Really helpful to hear your comments. Now, the next submitter has withdrawn. That's Mr. Aitken, or Ms. Aitken. The next is Bernard O'Shaughnessy, who I understand is here. Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
I'll have to sit.
Oh, that's right, that's right. No, it's right for Mr. O'Shaughnessy to sit. It's all right.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's all good. All good. Yeah, thank you. I'll just a couple of seconds to get my papers out, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And Mr. O'Shaughnessy, you have 10 minutes,
Yes.
and ideally would have the opportunity for questions at the conclusion, but
Yes.
we're in your hands now.
Yeah, Katie Pai. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko porongi te manga, ko whaikato te awa, ko ta papapo te whaka, ka whānai te iwi, ko te whanganui a taka kina, ko Bernard Ho. Councillors, when the issue of amalgamation of councils come along, I thought a lot, gathered information, made some notes, chatted with others in differing networks, and tried to reconcile their views and my viewpoint. This matter is of such importance that it shouldn't be rushed, but the status quo is not an option. What central government presents is highly undemocratic, but legal. My viewpoint is to support a unified, amalgamated plan for our cities and townships and rural areas to work towards shared resources and shared governments, including iwi. I am, and will be disappointed with the Mayor of Upper Hutt and a few others if their viewpoint of extreme localism overrides the good of the whole region by forcing the backstop provision to be evoked. If only two government ministers decide in early 27 how the region is to be organised, population-wise or geographically or politically, is devoid of principles and makes for some winners and many losers. All councillors here know their electorates. Many areas are similar, but then there's some differences. When you are an advocate, you understand the needs and desires and hopes of your area, and then you further those aspirations by joining in with neighbours to advance the well-being and good of the total body. I have a Wellington-wide viewpoint. I've lived, worked and played in every ward of Wellington City. I have lived, worked and played in other cities in Wellington. I've also lived, worked and played in towns and urban areas of Wellington region. I have been in contact across the Motu by email, phone, Zoomy thing, and chatting during friendship opportunities, small public gatherings, sports and political networks, cup of tea rooms, etc., to discuss, debate, argue about and reconcile this issue of amalgamation. I hope this council and others in the region make the right call. My submissions is a little bit further. I'm 75 years now and I've been busy. Coming to Wellington 1970. I've said there I've lived in all the wards, all of them. I worked in the public service from 66 to 91, 25 years, 10 years in admin, but then 15 years in HR, policy research, project work stuff. And I was in one district office of a public service, but I was in 8 head offices of the public service. In the Wellington region over the years, I've been a lifeguard out at Aquatic Centre and also team leader of lifeguards at Huia Pool. I did 4 months in Upper Hutt for dropped out college kids. In the weekend, many years ago, I was a rouseabout in Masterton. If you don't know what a rouseabout is, I'll tell you a bit later. And anyway, I've owned batches at Ramadi South Otaki, tramped throughout the region when my legs were good. There's a funny one, I was a human resource manager in Vikago City Council, so you can't go much further than that for a year. Anyway, I've travelled around New Zealand a lot, Aotearoa, and including the joy of being on 70 marae in New Zealand, which was in a private and a public capacity. So I have a city ward regional opinion and an Aotearoa perspective. I have huge interest all around New Zealand on amalgamations of council. I'm watching them, and they're watching us. They're watching Wellington. Amalgamation shouldn't be a giant dating game, said one headline. We need to make the best decision in the interests of our region and for democracy. Councillors, I thought a lot about amalgamation of councils in Wellington. Good, my time's okay. Jotted down some notes, chatted with others in various networks and tried to reconcile those viewpoints. And then I thought of something. Yeah, I'm an old guy. But anyway, I thought of asking AI. And so I asked AI, what are 10 bullet points to support amalgamation? And then I asked AI, what are 10 points against amalgamation? And then I asked AI how to reconcile the differing viewpoints. Then you've got about another 23 pages of what AI said. And I'm tabling those, and hopefully the majority of councillors here go along with the vision of what AI is about. So, councillors, I now just want you to turn to the last page of my submission, which the Secretary has. So just flip over all the pages that are stapled together, and the last page tells you this morning at 10:30 where we are in New Zealand. We have 78 councils, and 37 councils said they are for amalgamation in terms of Head Start, and then 24 councils are saying no, they oppose amalgamation totally and are opting out, which will trigger the backstop situation. And then it says 20 councils are still undecided. And I know a lot of those councils, and I know a lot of those people. I've been talking to them on Zoom, and that's why there's quite a lot of a mixture, just what Wellington is facing, huge numbers of councillors and mayors around Aotearoa are struggling with the same situation. And of course, we know that none of us liked it, but central government in the undemocratic way have stuck on the deadline of the 9th of August. So we've still got a way to go. And one of the things is some of the councils are saying, yes, we can get together with our neighbours and we'll work that through. And then some still have to take a position. Some are saying, be it Kapiti or Taupo, and I went to Taupo Nuiata College, and I was in the football team, and we played the Aitais at Turangi, the Aitai football team. They were tunnelers, you know. And anyway, the score was 7-0 because we were Kiwis and like the Aitais. It was good. And anyway, you see, a problem for councils, if I know, I think other people know, that if you think we can do it by yourselves, maybe you will for 6 months, but then you'll be rolled and then you'll have to join in anyway, because you won't get the opportunity of getting funding from whatever the funding sources are then going to be. So for somebody like Taupo or Kapiti Coast thinks they can stick their hand up and saying, we're okay, we got our people behind us, well, it don't work like that. So the problem still is, as with our council and all councils, you have to find something that's acceptable to central government, because I don't want to keep on thinking about that the decision that were made for a lot of councils rests on two ministers called Mr. Bishop and the other fella, because that's appalling. And so that's about me from me. I just want to end on, I want to really do a bit of Zoom thing, because I can take your, I'll try. Stick me on Zoom, I'm over the Wairarapa because I live there. I got hold of 10 mates, okay, and I said to them simply, hey, look, we've got this issue, are you for or against it? Anyone said, oh, we don't want a bar of Wellington, no. I said, well, do you want to go north or south? because you don't get you don't get the option to stay as you are. So do you want to go north and join up that way, or do you come south? Majority said, we'll come south to Wellington. Didn't like it, but that's the only option. And then I got hold of 10 people on Zoom up Kapiti Coast. I put the same question. Come on, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go north or south? We don't want to go either way, said Kapiti people. And I said, yeah, but you're not going to get a chance. If you want to stand up, you're going to get rolled. Nah. So they're still split, but they've got to come to the party, because the only way they can go is north or south. I'll stop there. I just want to finish on one little thing, which I think you'll... in 2016, I was a president of the Eastern and Southern Suburbs Grey Power Movement, and I went to the annual conference in Christchurch, and the first guest speaker was Maggie Barry. And anyway, and my job was to help the executive and greet the guest speaker at the door, take them up to the podium. They did this, and then I had to walk them out. And so the next guest speaker was a little guy. I'm little, but this guy was smaller than me, and his name was Winston. And he stunk of smoke because he stinks anyway, but that's a different story. And anyway, the third person in was this other little guy. Well, no, he was big. And anyway, I took that guy up to the podium, and he did a speech. And you see, when Maggie Berry left, that was a clap for her. When Winston left, but this other guy, the third guy, he got a big clap, and his name was Andrew Little.
I knew you from somewhere, Mr. O'Shaughnessy. I remember it well. Thank you very much. And can I just comment too on your very impressive tech skills, combination of using AI and those so many Zoom calls. We've really only got time for one question, which we're going to get from Councillor Young.
Thank you for all your research, Bernard. I'm just interested, what would you like to see? Would you like to see us amalgamate with the Wairarapa? Would you like to see us amalgamate with Kapiti, Horowhenua? What would you like?
I think both of we think there's a big problem in the cities and that, but actually there's even a bigger problem like in Wairarapa or Kapiti, because they've got to struggle with, when they get to it, they know full well they've got to go one way or the other. They just can't do it by themselves. And so I think we need to maybe in that area of, even our young people this morning talked about having this other executive, but you've got to be, they talked about making it 30, and I just think you can't do a committee of 30. Realistically, 10 or 15 max of representatives from each of the areas, and then build that as your authority for the future. Because we all know, all of our cities have got big issues, but we're also a big equity. We're talking about billions of dollars of business here, and also spread across the motu. That's a big deal, and it has to be managed, and you just can't chop it up and let bits of it fall off. Thank you.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy, thank you very much. Very insightful comments, and we will read your written submission that you've left us with as well. So thank you for your time this afternoon. And we are running slightly ahead of time, but our next submitter, Hayley Horan from Business Central, is here. So, Hayley, I'll invite you. We're taking submissions from the lectern as a preference. Thank you very much.
So from here?
From there, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. On behalf of Business Central and Wellington Chamber of Commerce, we absolutely welcome this conversation about the future of our incredible Wellington region. This is one of the most significant opportunities in decades for Wellington to think differently about its future. Wellington has enormous strengths, as we all know. It's New Zealand's capital, it's highly educated workforce, we have strong research capability, and we have world-class creative and technology sectors. The two biggest powerhouses in the world in the movie and creative sector live right here in this region. So we also need to be honest that we have not kept up pace economically. As a chamber, as Business Central, private sector growth is fundamentally going to be the reason we succeed here. In order to do that, it's all about, at its heart, we need to create that region that is easy to invest in, it's easy to build, and quite frankly, we must be easier to do business in. So much so that we believe the discussion around the focus on council boundaries, honestly, from a business perspective, the focus needs to be on outcomes. Businesses want faster decisions, as I said, better infrastructure, stronger coordination, and more certainty. For business, success means a region that attracts investment, keeps talented people here, and delivers infrastructure before a crisis. Also supports innovation and competes confidently for national and international opportunities. So we need robust, independent analysis for sure on the decisions that are going to be made, and it needs to be based on evidence. We want clear views of the costs, benefits, risks, and practical implications. But the real question here is whether these reforms will make Wellington more competitive, the Wellington Greater Region more competitive in 10, 20 or 30 years. This process should not only be about solving today's problems, it should be helping us decide what kind of region we want to build for the future. And I say 10, 20 and 30 years on purpose because I feel as though without that long-term view, we will make short-term decisions. Now, yes, new governance arrangements should recognise how businesses already operate across the region. And I think it's really important to state businesses do not stop at council boundaries. People often live in one and come to work in another. Customers come across the regions, freight moves across multiple councils. Infrastructure networks already operate regionally. I'm going to keep this short. In closing, Business Central's recommendation is based on one simple principle. Governance should reflect how the regional economy actually works. Our focus is not on changing boundaries for its own sake. Our focus is on creating governance arrangements that support growth, improve coordination, and give businesses greater confidence to invest in the Wellington region. We encourage every council to engage constructively in the Head Start process and put forward proposals that will strengthen the regional's long-term competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Appreciate those comments. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Chung, followed by Deputy Mayor McNulty.
No, thanks very much, Hayley. I have a question about the number of people that actually come into Wellington to work. Now, we hear a lot about commuters that come in Kapiti or from the Manawatu, but when I was wondering why Kapiti didn't want to come in with us, so I talked to some of the people out there, and they said that the majority of the people who live in that area actually stay there. They're not commuters; they're retired people, and so I'm wondering what do we need to do to actually keep the people engaged about coming in here, to work, but keeping in mind that most of the population don't come in. So what do we need to do in our strategy to actually keep the ones we want and let the territorial authorities up there look after the main sort of group of people?
Yeah. I don't want to pretend I have all that data. I lived on the Kapiti Coast, came into town, felt like a lot of us were coming into town every day. So I don't know, but I would say, and what we hear and what I have heard, not just through our businesses, but through engaging in this process, is just want to feel like there's some power in the community, and it is not the big Wellington finger pointing telling Kapiti Coast what to do. If we can, or you can, solve for that, then I think being heard in the right way that doesn't make people feel powerless, as with anything, will be the most important thing. It's just a point of view.
Very helpful, thank you. Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Kia ora, Hayley. Thanks for coming in. Obviously, in an amalgamation, there's a huge amount of rationalisation you have to do of rating differentials. You've got different commercial rates in Porirua, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, and has the Chamber done any thinking about what that might, or what your idealised version of that would look like if you had, the 4 metros or the Wairarapa in?
No, that's a fair question, but no, we have not tested that properly. That's the honest truth. At the moment, what we're really saying is we believe that getting the Head Start is way better at starting that conversation. And, if we can support in getting some of those numbers or feedback, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Foon.
Kia ora, Hayley. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in and thank you for your work with the Chamber. I'm sure you've had an understanding of the Martin Jenkins financial report. And so I guess that, one of the unhappy trade-offs we may have are increased costs in the initial stages anyway. Do you have any, and I respect, we've talked about that 10, 20, 30-year goal. I mean, how do you see a lot of the businesses weighing up the impact of those initial costs versus long-term outcomes?
Yeah, I don't know that research inside out, but I did see the big ugly number of 270 million. What I would say is I was listening to some of the other speakers earlier today talking about a potential central government loan to support that. I don't know much about that either, so I'm not going to take any questions on that. But what I would say is if you're a business right now, you are the shock absorber for everything that's happening. So I would say business would expect that you're going to bring in experts, that you're going to make good, rational decisions, and you're going to treat their money like it is, and you're going to treat this like a business, and you'll do the most important things first. So I think there's got to be a level of trust here there, and maybe that's not there at the moment, if I just speak freely. So a little bit of trust that good decisions and capability will be made, and the most important things will happen first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien and then Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, you just mentioned in your words there about how you want sort of governance arrangements that achieve, coordination, fast decision making, all those things. Have you had any thought, obviously in a Head Start proposal, we've put forward some of those governance arrangements. Have you thought about what you would see achieving those best?
I think not so much, to be honest. I think this is the beginning of the conversation. Our role is really to speak on behalf of business, and I would expect that they're going to be part of that process and feeding into that.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Thanks, Hayley. You talked about, it may not be the exact words, but I was thinking your competitive advantage. What is the point of doing all of this? Has the Chamber got any views on what that might well be? Because I don't think it's been articulated so far in the documentation that's been out there, and whether you've got any views on that. Just in terms of assisting us in helping shape how big should the unitary be? Should it, just be metros? Should it be the whole up to the Wairarapa?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and there's two views here. One is just go and do it once, and the other is there is some data that says that potentially the Wairarapa should potentially be its own little area. I don't know. We believe that as long as any case stacks up where we begin to be a region where we can have better infrastructure, have people want to come and invest here, I think that's really the frame that business is putting out there. I don't think we're turning up with all the answers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
One of the things I had been thinking about was in relation to your making it easier to do business. And one of the contentions that I'm playing with in my mind is the difference between a smaller council being more adaptable to the needs of local businesses and a larger council providing more consistency in its rules across the region. And I was just wondering, in terms of the businesses that you're talking to, is there one that comes across as more important to them when thinking about these proposals?
Cost. Yeah. Cost to a business. Like, we had a small business, we had a roundtable recently with the Minister of Small Business and Manufacturing, and the fact that it costs twice as much to build a shed 5 years later says probably not, things aren't going so great. I know that's a simple example. When that's consistent and not twice the price as 5 years ago, I think we're on the right track.
And then Councillor Liberty, and then I think that'll be the last one.
Kia ora, Hayley. Just very quickly, and possibly yes or no, but have you discussed this with the other chambers of commerce across the region, and is there a view that's shared?
Yes, I have, and there is not a view that's 100% shared. So probably better to have individual chambers at this point to talk to that.
All right. Hayley, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your comments. That's been very helpful.
Great to see you all, meet you all. Thank you.
We're slightly ahead of time still, but I understand Tom Buckley is here online from PSA. So, Tom, we can see you and hear you, so go ahead.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a submission. I'm Tom Buckley. I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Public Service Association, and I'm looking to make a submission on behalf of our members who are employed throughout Wellington City Council in the Wairau region. We have over 600 members in Wellington City Council, 1,500 members through the wider Wellington region, and 13,000 members across the country in local government. And we represent a wide range of different vocations and people that work within local government. We do see in the Public Service Association that there is a mutual interest in the success of local government entities through the Head Start process. We think it's a very important principle for us to hold, that the shared interest between our members, workforces, and executive leadership teams, elected members, is important to uphold and to focus around. Our PSA members have had and have raised concerns with the Head Start process more generally, particularly around maintaining local democracy and compressed timeframes that have been involved in the transition process, and lack of the enabling legislation that has accompanied other pieces of reform in the local government area over the last recent years, including water reform, along with others, and the minimal resourcing that's been provided to support this work. I think that gives us a wider backdrop of the local government reforms and how that's been impacted. We obviously are aware of rates capping legislation travelling through, and also changes to the wider framework of local government. This is a significant reform, and it's causing a great deal of anxiety amongst our members, people that work in local government across the country, and particularly inside of Wellington. Our members are feeling disempowered by that process, and it's had a significant impact. They rely on their work and their incomes for livelihoods, and there is a significant concern around risk of any transition of process or amalgamation that may impact on them. I think we've seen a lot of local government workers targeted by lazy rhetoric and minimising their role in their communities and inside their workforce through the wider dialogue that's occurred around these proposals. We do have in the Public Service Association, and we'll be focusing around trying to make sure that we have better outcomes for any transition or amalgamation process that's entered into across local government. But we're very keen to avoid long-term negative employment consequences that we see happen when transition or amalgamation processes are undertaken without appropriate resourcing or consideration. And those include the impacts on retention and attraction of key staff into organisations, and retaining the key skills and knowledge that are needed to ensure that services can be delivered, and the impact and the longer term impact on workplace culture where transition is done poorly. The impact on that can be very severe if not done well. The Public Service Association is going to focus through the next few months across the country around 4 key areas, including ensuring that members of the Public Service Association have employment security for any transition, that workers have a voice through any transition process, and to ensure that they are able to participate through and ensure that their expertise is taken into account, and that we're asking that all workers going through transition retain the same employment conditions that they currently have. It's not seen as an opportunity to dismantle long-term conditions that have been held, and that the various councils undertaking, Wellington Council included in this, uphold the principles of te tiriti as we travel through this work. The PSA has significant experience with large-scale reorganisation. Auckland is an example of that. We have managed to work through those reorganisations, and we have seen some positive outcomes from that. So we're keen to try and replicate as far as we can those times it's been done well. Most recently with Auckland Transport and the amalgamation into Auckland City, we've seen that done well. We have seen it done poorly, and those long-term impacts are things we're keen to avoid. As I said, we are keen to support local government to ensure that it can deliver services to the communities in the way that is able to support residents, businesses, and develop infrastructure that's needed and deliver those services. We believe it's key that strong workforces are a part of that, and that they're supported through the transition of any organisation. I think a failure here to think of the long-term consequences can have significant impacts further downstream for organisations. That's all from me.
Thanks, Tom. We'll have some questions, but before I call on other councillors, thank you for outlining the four sort of issues or principles that the PSA is guided by in this sort of process. I'm keen to know, from your point of view, either drawing on the experience that PSA had with the Auckland amalgamation, but also just your expectation that in the event that a proposal goes to ministers from the Wellington region, and in the event that it's accepted, that entails some form of merger, what is your expectation about the nature of that engagement as the detail of an amalgamation is put together?
Thanks, Mayor, for the question. What we found with Auckland Council is we had more time, but we were able to construct an appropriate an approach across all the different entities that were amalgamated together. And inside of that was a strong worker voice to be able to engage around how those different organisations are brought together, including structure, terms and conditions, clear communication, an opportunity for workers to be able to participate, understanding the decision-making process, and also the ability to feed into that so that their expertise wasn't lost as the process was going through its transition. I think overall our experience of that was within Auckland was a opportunity to kind of see a far greater improvement in terms of the wider engagement between workers and the council, and a very positive outcome at the end.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I have a question from Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks very much. I'm wondering, when you first started looking at amalgamation with your members, did you actually discuss with them or to get any feedback about whether they thought that was a good thing, or did they approach it with some sort of trepidation, or what sort of feeling did you actually get from them?
We have a wide variety of different opinions across our membership around the approach. There is a deep level of anxiety around Head Start and what that means for many of our members, because the uncertainty is quite significant. We have encouraged that our members engage through the process that other residents in the community can do to put forward their opinions around what sort of various outcomes might be from the process. But there is generally a sense of anxiety around what this will mean.
Great. Could I have a follow-up, please?
Sure.
Yep. Okay. So based on that, I can understand that your members, of course, want to retain or want to ensure that they retain their job opportunities and the features that the employment features that they have now. But do you think that there's any feeling of opportunities in this as well? Like, do you have some of your members who say that, oh, this is good because then we can actually have opportunities where we can actually advance because we're working in a bigger pool? Did that feeling come out to you?
I haven't seen that feeling come through at this stage, but that is probably because of the stage we're at in terms of the process, and that far more likely is the anxiety that I've talked about from different workers, because we're not sure what the future holds, and it very much is and does feel quite uncertain at this point.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Al-Rubayi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tom. Just wanting to acknowledge the delegates sitting in the public gallery, Matt and the LT, and anybody else who has assisted in the submission going through and your submission, Tom. But also just acknowledging that any change process is going to be concerning for anyone in their roles in your organisation, how that may look like. So I just want to, I guess, assure my commitment to making sure employees and workers have their rights preserved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Tom, for the submission. It's a little bit of a technical question, but I'm wondering, what does the most recent collective employment agreement with the PSA and the City Council, how does it address the issue of whether the council itself ceases to be and is succeeded by another organisation?
I guess that it is a somewhat technical question. We have standard change management processes set out inside of the collective agreements across the PSA, including Wellington City Council, but we'll be somewhat directed by, with recent legislation, how those transition, the legislation may describe transition. And we've seen a variety of different forms come through legislation. So we're waiting to engage around that as that is developed. That can be, and we have seen that override different collective agreements. We're very, very keen, and we'll be approaching all councils to ensure that there is some commitment to a process that we can agree on that ensures that we have good outcomes for people through transition. Because I think taking shortcuts and undermining that process being done well can have those really long-term negative employment outcomes that we're really keen to avoid. And the experience of workers through that is often very, very poor. So we want to try and make sure that regardless of what the legislation says, that we do have a best practice approach that's undertaken based on our experience with other entities. And we'll be coming to you with some proposals around that.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for giving your time and your submissions. That's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Can I invite 3 minutes ahead of time, Gavin Beattie, to make his remarks. Mr. Beattie.
Kia ora koutou, and Gavin Beattie is my name. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a Wellington City resident, but also a former senior advisor to the Local Government Commission, and with a continuing interest in local government matters, particularly governance and representation issues. And reflecting that continuing interest, I did start a comprehensive community of interest study for the Wellington region as a matter of interest, as a basis for effective local government structures in the region. And I'm referring to some of that, or the findings from some of that in my comments today. Yes, I also responded to the Mayor's invitation a little while ago to make some comments about amalgamation options, and I'm going to reiterate some of those comments today. And also referring to the principles the Mayor set out in that invitation. But firstly, I repeat the comment I made that while supportive of consideration of reform, I note that at best there's international debate about the merits or otherwise of forced amalgamation, and particularly as to whether bigger is better, including much hyped savings and efficiencies. And alternatively, whether you can achieve the same results at significantly less cost and disruption through more shared service arrangements. But I put that aside at this stage. I believe local government reform needs to be driven by clear goals for what you actually want to achieve. It shouldn't just be about deciding to meet a nonsensical and arbitrary government deadline for Head Start proposals. These goals should relate to all three levels: regional, city, district, and community governance levels. I believe there's a good case, first of all, to argue for enhanced regional governance across Aotearoa. Mayor's Principle 4, respecting regional difference, and 5, evidence-based. This case is about, first of all, recognising the diversity of different areas, Auckland versus West Coast, for example. It's about addressing environmental threats, climate change, increasing urbanisation, to name but two, and around which regional councils are currently formed with boundaries that keep whole river catchments intact and avoid arbitrary divisions of the coastline between councils. It's about making the best use of the country's limited resources and other human and other resources to address such issues, including not spreading these resources too thinly and avoiding what would be actual duplication of local government functions. Finally, it's about enabling equal and manageable opportunities for advocacy to central government for all parts of the country to balance those currently provided and taken by Auckland. So on this basis, I support continued recognition of a Wellington region. I acknowledge the government's intention to abolish regional councils, but I still think the regional boundaries as defined in 1989 should be maintained. I see an opportunity to establish regional forums across the country, comprising local government, mana whenua, and other interests as appropriate, to meet with central government on a regular and collaborative basis to address issues of mutual interest and, among other things, to counter the current Wellington knows best attitude of central government. On the question of how many councils there might be in Wellington region, again, the Mayor's principle 5, evidence-based, my community of interest study suggests either one council covering the region or 3 councils, one each for the metropolitan area, the Kapiti Coast and the Wairarapa. Clearly there are strong functional community of interest connections across the region in terms of travel to work and to school, location of shopping, and important regional council functions such as public transport, environmental management and emergency management. My study also shows that some of these connections are stronger within the metropolitan area as one entity and rather weaker in the areas further out from Wellington City, particularly so in relation to the Wairarapa. On this basis, but also on the basis of enabling democratic local decision-making and action, one of the statutory purposes of local government, Mayor's Principle 2, protecting local voice, governing at 3, governing at the scale people actually live, and 6, systems of local democracy matter, I support the 3 unitary model. This model would allow, I think, a better balance of local community-level decision-making structures vis-a-vis the main council, potentially more community councils, in which, in line with the principle of subsidiarity, and better reflecting different local identities, priorities and preferences. We also recognise the Wairarapa and Kapiti Coast as distinct entities, historically and geographically, and with which residents can identify and have a sense of belonging, which evidence suggests encourages their participation in local elections and council decision-making generally. It would also allow the Wairarapa and Kapiti Coast as sub-regional areas to still benefit from collaborative arrangements with the metropolitan area, with its greater resources, and with this involving transfers of certain functions, such as public transport, inputting into regional spatial planning, etc. I acknowledge the 3 unitary authority model may not be seen as best aligned with some of the criteria of the Head Start proposals, including simplifying local government, but there'll always be trade-offs involved in any proposal. Central government also needs to be reminded, as I said before, that the statutory purpose of local government includes the equally important enabling of democratic local decision-making and action, not just service delivery suited to its preferences. Guy.
Well, thank you very much, Gavin. It's incredibly valuable to have the benefit of your experience and wisdom from your previous roles. So thank you for that. Are there any questions, councillors? Yeah, Councillor Osborne.
Thanks, Gavin. It's really great submission. I'm going to ask a question of quite a few people. We're looking at this model where essentially we'd have one larger council and then community councils or something similar underneath, and a lot of people have talked about it's a difficult word to say, subsidiarity. I don't think I got it right. What powers do you think that community council, what powers do you think should be devolved down to that council?
I start with the present legislative model for local boards in Auckland, which says non-regulatory activities should be allocated, it's not by legislation, as opposed to delegated at the discretion of the council. So the non-regulatory activities by default go to the local level, and it's up to the governing body then to argue that there's a case for it to be dealt with at the highest level. So the responsibility is so by default it goes to the local level. So that's the non-regulatory activities. That's your parks, your libraries, your pool, your reserves, those local facilities, as distinct from regulatory matters, which I think there is a reasonable argument that there should be consistency at the regional or the city district level for consistency. You know, you don't have different standards, which doesn't aid enforcement across local areas. So that's the starting point. I think there's certainly the local board model was far from perfect, and I think there's a case for more empowerment of local structures, and that's where I think the community council model probably should come in, but that would require more legislation. But the starting point, I think, is that distinction between non-regulatory and regulatory, and so it's your local facilities, particularly.
Can I just ask one quick follow-up?
Yeah, that, and then Councillor Calvert after that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. Do you see those two bodies both having an ability to raise revenue, or do you think?
Yeah, that's another very good question. I mean, that's where I think I personally believe that the local, and that's where local boards in the Auckland model don't have this power. But though some councils nominally provide the ability for local boards or community boards to recommend a targeted rate. But I think there possibly is an argument for a community council, and this would require legislation, to at least recommend, and then be up to the governing body to put up the counter argument for a targeted rate for a different level of service for your library or your swimming pool or whatever. And that's where actually the Auckland model started, that Manukau City, before Auckland Council came into being, had free access to swimming pools. And that level, that was picked up initially by the Auckland Council to be a targeted rate for Manukau, and then it morphed into a wider. So I think, and this is, I mean, I haven't necessarily thought through all the final detail, but I think there's an argument for a community council to, at the very least, argue or to be able to recommend a targeted rate above a minimum consistent level of service, and then it would be, and if you had a reasonable area for that community council to have a targeted rate over that area, with the requirement it's consistent with the governing body's rating policies. It's got under certain criteria, but it would be up to the governing body to say no, this doesn't comply. And it's the case at the moment that the Local Government Commission does have some arbitrating functions if there is a dispute between the local level and the governing body to actually be the adjudicator.
Thank you. Just given the time, just time for one more question. So, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, look, very quick, but I'm quite interested to see how the community boards have been working in Christchurch, because that's a similar size. And just wonder whether you've got any specific views.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I mean, Christchurch they've had city-wide community boards since 1989. It's quite a different culture, supposedly, in the city than Wellington. Wellington, as you know, have had two since '89, and not. But Christchurch, which doesn't have apart from Banks Peninsula, doesn't have the geographical distinctions that Wellington does, for example. So it's interesting why there is that distinction. But Christchurch has quite deliberately adopted the local board approach to it. And they've picked up the legislative approach to say, again, that non-regulatory activities should go to the local level unless the council itself can argue that there's a case to be dealt with citywide. And so they've actually adopted that sort of approach in Christchurch. And it's worked it has worked generally very well. There have been times when the councils have actually tried to cut back or to remove some of the powers of the community boards, but potentially it can work and has worked at times very well in Christchurch.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Again, very much appreciate the wisdom and insights that you've been able to bring today. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's been helpful. And just when I thought we were running on time, we're 1 minute behind now. So I'll now call on Nick Ruane, with whom we are familiar, but he is here today in his capacity as representative of the Greater Brooklyn Residents Association. I wasn't aware that there was a minor Brooklyn, but there is a Greater Brooklyn. It could be. I mean, we're talking about expansionism. It starts at Brooklyn, obviously.
Kia ora, you all know me. I'm the immediate past chair of the Greater Brooklyn Residents Association. I'm just going to make a couple of points and then I'm going to hand over to Nick. I guess the first thing is thank you for allowing us to make this submission. I'm a little bit rushed because we were on this morning and then we were on later, but now we're on now. And I have to say my bike broke down. But anyway, the main concerns I have about amalgamation is, one, 9 weeks, as everybody said, is not long enough to come up with a really decent plan. And two, I'm not sure that it's actually going to save us a lot of money based on the research that I've done. And our main concern is what will happen to local representation. At the moment, we have councillors that we can ring and say what's happening in our neck of the woods, and it needs to be anything in the plan has to cover local representation. And now I'll hand over to Nick.
Thank you, Katie. Greater Brooklyn, yes, very good. Welcome, everyone. I'm here with a different hat on today, but I think I'll just pick up on Katie's point around localism and how that plays out in Brooklyn. I think about a particular instance that happened recently around the Brooklyn floods and how that impacted our community. There are members in our community that know every single street, every single person, and how that impacts our local community. And they're part of the social infrastructure of our community. That will be true for every community. And they're part of the social infrastructure of our city, and they're part of our residents association. And the question that I have is, how will that be part of the amalgamation plan that this council puts forward? How will you be able to get the localism with the amalgamation? Because that's very, very important when we have large events like floods, earthquakes, natural disasters, the ability to be able to reach into those local communities and understand where the people are that you need to be able to wrap support around. And within the communities, there are those people. We know that they are there. They are part of communities. They are attached to residents associations. The other point that I wanted to make was around how will we be sure that a community like Brooklyn is factored into decision making. We're talking here about having local councils. At the moment, we have the ability to come and speak to you about decisions that impact us. We have the ability to pick up the phone, like Katie said, talk to our local councillors, and that is a relatively close relationship. What will that relationship look like going forward? We may not know who our local councillor is. That person may be someone that lives not in our community, not in our city. That person may be someone far away from our community who may not have even lived in our community or visited it. So the type of discussion that we need to have is, how does that localism interact with the amalgamation conversation? Katie's already covered the costs, so I won't go into that. And the urgency, so I won't go into that either. So I suppose I will conclude with, we need for this council to demonstrate the argument before support will be forthcoming. And It needs to be demonstrated against 5 questions. Does it protect real local representation? Does it guarantee a voice for catchments like Brooklyn or communities like Brooklyn? And does it prove that savings are really there, if they are actually there? Does it take the time to demonstrate good governance? Does it separate what should genuinely be shared from what should actually remain local? And for us, that's a really important part of the discussion. And until those questions are answered in a truthful way, it will be difficult to actually have a conversation where we can support. So at the moment, we remain very neutral and waiting for information to be put forward. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for those 5 points you raised. I think are really helpful and really important. We have Deputy Mayor McNulty has a question.
Kia ora, Nick. You sort of hit on one of the key tensions I have in this community council model around representation. One of the things, if we get into the detailed design phase, we'll have to figure out quite early is, do you have, let's say, more councillors, but you're more likely to have access to community councillors that can help in some areas and can't in others? Or is it better to have really not that layer and have, I suppose, a more direct relationship to councillors that have got a meaningful input in all things? So that's kind of the spectrum of where we go, and you can have easy access to councillors that will be able to help in some areas but in not others, or is it better that there is really the representation is built around that relationship of members? They might be slightly harder to access because of larger wards, but that they have meaningful input in all areas.
I feel it's really important to have meaningful input, particularly around decisions to do with, say, for example, I'll choose community facilities has been a really big one in our community, around how those decisions are made. It would be really useful if those decisions were devolved down to the community level to have input around how those funding decisions were made. So how you devolve the localism down to the community level and how you make those decisions would be really beneficial if those communities actually had some say around how those decisions were made. Yeah.
Any other questions for Nick? Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks for coming in again, Nick. I guess my question is it's a little bit like Councillor McNulty's question. When you're looking at the current system where we have your ward councillors, do you find that this is actually a preferable way of actually contacting the council with your issues, or do you think that having a committee like, say, your residents' association is actually a better way, because then you can discuss these issues before you actually present to council? Because if we amalgamate and we look at a much, much bigger region, then there's going to be so many representatives. If you have the same number of constituents per elected member, then there's going to be a huge number of them. So do you think that would actually change the way that you can actually access the council and pass information forward? Like, do you think that it's preferable to do that? Or how would you envisage that working?
I think the residents' associations perform a different role to council at this point in time. They're much more closely connected to communities. So it's really the discussion around what or how closely devolved the council governing structures are to the communities, and what roles those devolved governing structures have. Because at the moment, for example, our residents' association has no ability to impact any decision-making on what happens in our community. We just are the voice of our community on particular issues. If we were to have a conversation around around taking the role that we have and moving it into a more of a decisional space around how assets or how community funding is delivered into the community, that would be a very different conversation, and it's certainly one that I can't speak for anyone else, but certainly in our community that would be welcomed, around how the facilities are managed and how they are looked after. Many people in our community have very strong feelings about our community facilities.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting to use the Brooklyn context here for some of my thinking. If you had a unitary council and let's say it's elected on a very fiscal restraint basis, inflationary rate, 0% rates, you get a community council that's representing Brooklyn, and that community council has been elected on a basis of we want to improve, invest and build into facilities. The UA says, nope, you're not going to get that budget because our mandate is to essentially do nothing. How do you see that playing out, and can you envision ways to try and de-escalate that tension? Because I can see how you can have community councils really pitted against the UAs in the current model.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Ben, and thank you for passing it over.
If you've got any answers.
I mean, that is essentially the number of the problem, right? Because communities have a much better understanding of how their assets are performing and where the need is. But that is really where the decisions need to be made. And I think if you go into most communities, they will have a pretty pragmatic view on where things need to change, where the investments need to be made, where they can potentially hold off on making an investment in 1 year. And I feel like that is a model to move into. And if you were to say maybe we're not going to make an investment this year in this facility, but that'll mean that next year or the year after we can invest into a different facility, that is a reasonable conversation to have, because at the moment there is just no decision making at the community level. The conversation right now is this is happening, and communities are just going to have to live with it. So I think bringing it right down and saying these are the constraints we live with, this is the options are on the table, is a far more realistic conversation to have with communities.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Nick, again. Always very insightful, always very thoughtful, so thank you. So colleagues, although this session was described as from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m, we now have a 1 hour and 20-minute break for us to stretch our legs and maybe grab several glasses of water, or I'm sure there's some, fizzy lemonade or something available. But we will be back at 5:30 p.m. Thank you. That's everybody, and our submitter is. Afternoon, Mackenzie. Look, my apologies for sort of rushing you. This situation arose where other submitters are unavailable, and you were the last. And look, I'm very appreciative that you've been able to accommodate this and get this submission now, so that councillors who've had a long and exhausting day can reflect on the submissions that we've had so far. So thank you very much, and I'll leave it to you. You've got 10 minutes, ideally with some time within that 10 minutes for questions from councillors.
Thank you. Thanks for accommodating me this evening. My name is Mackenzie Valgrey, and I'm here representing the Wellington Labour Local Body Committee, which represents Wellington-based members of the New Zealand Labour Party with respect to local government matters. And the committee thanks councillors for holding these hearings and hearing from the public about amalgamation. We believe that the Head Start pathway is preferable to the backstop pathway, and that it is important that elected representatives have as much input as possible into the future of local government in Wellington and advocate for the interests of our residents and workers. In terms of what local authority groupings make the most sense, the priority should be to establish a strong, cohesive Metro Unity Authority. In saying that, we recognise the economic considerations at play, including the regional public transport subsidy. Whatever the makeup of a new council, it must include Māori wards. Nearly 70% of voters in the last election voted to keep Māori wards, and councillors have a responsibility to ensure that treaty partnership is upheld and reflected in whatever model is proposed. To ensure local voice, all elected representatives at any level should be elected through wards. If there is to be a layer beneath a unitary authority, then discussions in the region so far have already recognised that local boards are not the best answer. Auckland's experience suggests challenges with limited power, uneven funding, low participation, and vulnerability of capture by narrow local interests. Influence is limited over major decisions such as rates, borrowing bylaws, and core financial choices. So the Wellington LLBC urges councillors to consider a proposal that ensures that all elected representatives at whatever level are empowered to make real decisions. There are statutory limits as to what can be delegated under the Local Government Act, and this should factor into the proposal that Wellington City Council supports. Local identities should be protected in a way that drives up voter turnout and strengthens democracy, and not just protecting local for the sake of it. One of the biggest risks that we see with amalgamation is that it becomes an opportunity to divest and dispose of local assets and underfund services. We strongly urge councillors to protect our public assets and resist attempts to create conditions of austerity. The strong response from Wellingtonians against the attempted sale of the council's airport shares show that as a city, we care about public ownership. Councillors must be strong stewards of our public assets throughout the entire process and be vigilant to any attempts of privatisation and privatisation by stealth, including any further outsourcing. It will also be important to have transparency through the transition process as a further safeguard. Caution must also be given to the creation of any new council-controlled organisations. They can weaken democratic accountability by shifting public functions away from direct elected control. Auckland Council is a useful warning. After years of arm's length delivery, Auckland Council has moved to take back major transport responsibilities from Auckland Transport because it wasn't responsive to the needs of the city and was almost completely unaccountable to Aucklanders. This brings me to one of the biggest opportunities of amalgamation. One of the government's criteria for assessing a Best Start proposal is economies of scale to demonstrate responsible and affordable asset management, infrastructure investment, and service delivery. Public ownership and public delivery is responsible and it is affordable. It keeps public money in our local economy, protects Wellingtonians from the interests of private institutions, and means that no money collected through rates is going towards making corporate profits. A larger council creates economies of scale that should be utilised at every opportunity, and we strongly encourage councillors to use this process to strengthen public ownership and public delivery in our region. Kia ora koutou. Welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mackenzie. That's really helpful to have those comments. Any questions from any councillors? Yes, Councillor Chung.
Hi, Mackenzie. Thanks very much for talking to us. I'm also very interested in economies of scale, and I've been trying to find out, exactly how we can actually do these things. But do you have any idea, any of your own thoughts about where we can actually get these economies of scale if we actually go into an amalgamation with, say, the main metropolitan areas, Lower Hutt, Pororua, Upper Hutt maybe, and possibly Kapiti and the Wairarapa. So I'm trying to understand what we can actually do. But do you have some idea of the things that we can do? And I do agree with your comments about the public transport.
Yeah, I think it's a chance to review all contracts and kind of look at all services. Something that as a party we kind of campaigned on, I think is good to consider, is looking at things like cleaning or traffic management, as well as thinking about how public transport could be delivered better through public services. Those are just some places to start, and it would need to be done. There need to be kind of work done at looking at what is the most realistic and efficient through this process.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much,
Councillor Osborne.
Kia ora, Mackenzie. Just a real quick question. If we were to amalgamate, would you support using STV or FPP as a voting system?
I won't be able to, the committee doesn't necessarily have a position on that, so won't be answering that one because we haven't really talked about that one.
Any other questions for Mackenzie? No. Mackenzie, that's all the questions. Thank you so much for your time. And again, apologies for mucking you around with the time available. I know that you've got a number of pressures in your very important profession you do as teaching our next generation. So thank you, and it's been really helpful to have your comments today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
So, colleagues, I think that concludes the submissions, and this process. We'll conclude with our usual closing prayer. If you join with me. Unihia, 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 ki te uri tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tina, ne te wairewa, e te tara takatū, kōiara e rongo, whakairea ake ki runga, kia wātea, ai rā kua wātea. Kia ora.